August 2014, I was standing in the dream city of New York, staring at New York's glorious skylines and asking myself one and only one question again. Who am I? My name is Mahdis and I'm a self-love champion and a vibrant coach. My story began 33 years ago in a small town in northeast Iran called Esfarayan. Chapter 1. How to be a good girl. Don't laugh out loud in the street. Don't play games with boys. A good girl will always cover her body. A good girl will obey her father and brother until she gets married. Then she will obey and please her husband. I was born in a small town in Iran, and these are the words I grew up with. It took me many years to free myself from them. It has been a journey of self-discovery and painful change. I have lost so many pieces of my identity, but in losing them all, I have created myself anew. I have never been quite what others expected. From the day I was born, my parents were trying again for a boy. Instead, they got me, their third daughter. My father was the firstborn son of a traditional Middle Eastern family. It is considered important that the first son have at least one boy who can pass along the family's name. My gender was a disappointment to my parents. When I was 2, they finally got the son they were hoping for. Chapter 2. Modesty and conformity were everything. Growing up in Iran, I had no choice but to attend all-girls school. Each day began the same way, lining up in the yard and singing the national anthem. The principal then walked by each line of girls to make sure nobody was wearing forbidden makeup or nail polish. She even checked our eyebrows to make sure they have not been plucked. We all had to abide by the Islamic dress code. At about the time we could read and write with confidence and do some simple math, we started preparing for our coming of age ceremony. Schoolmasters were required to perform this ceremony for girls who had turned 9 years old, and boys when they turned 15. The ceremony is a celebration of puberty, officially marking the cross from childhood into adulthood. From that day forward, a 9-year-old girl is seen as a woman and is held accountable for performing her religious obligations. Chapter 3. Womanhood and Shame. I reached womanhood with little idea of what it truly meant to be a woman. My lack of knowledge was due to our culture of modesty. It was considered taboo to talk about the body and its changes. I didn't know anything about hormonal changes, and I knew nothing about menstruation. When I got my first period when I was 12, I thought I was horribly sick. I was terrified but much too shy to discuss it with my own mother or sisters. For 3 days, I kept my embarrassing secret to myself. I finally had no choice but to tell my mother. She explained my condition and told me only the most basic instructions for how to handle my new womanly curves. There was no significance to it. That was all I learned. Chapter 4. Little by little, I began questioning my beliefs. As far as religion, my parents were not terribly involved. But I became more and more interested in practicing religion through my studies at school. When I was 14, I was fully practicing Islam and I wanted to be the best of the best at my religion. To show my zeal and dedication, I prayed 5 times a day and fasted more than 30 days out of the year and covered every part of my body but my face, hands and feet. I attended all holy ceremonies, volunteered at mosque and recited the Holy Quran. In an attempt to grow closer to God, I decided I wanted to visit the spiritual center of Islam when I was 18. My parents granted me my wish and allowed me to go to Mecca in Saudi Arabia to offer my prayers. Although I was amazed to be in the bustling center of Islam, but I didn't feel as connected as I had hoped. I felt a vague emptiness and it left me unsatisfied. This experience left me pensive. Little by little, I began questioning my beliefs. Chapter 5. Torn in Two. Even though my outward appearance was still pious and submissive, inside I was dreaming of something else. I wanted to visit elegant cities in the world and live outside the borders of Iran. 6 months after my trip to Mecca, I decided to follow my sisters to India to study. Young woman traveling to a foreign country to study was very uncommon in my town, but I felt it would suit me. I was so excited to move out of my small town and live in a completely different environment. My adventure had finally begun. I could walk out of my house with my arms and hair uncovered, and I found this thrilling in many ways. I felt free for the very first time in my life. But I couldn't shake this nagging doubt, this fear that God would not love me with my new wild ways. This fear reached its peak when I fell in love with a man 4 months after moving to New Delhi. I kissed him without any intention of marriage, and it was wonderful, but it was also horrible, in that it left me traumatized. It felt both right and wrong, and standing in the middle, I was torn in two. I managed a way to straddle in both sides of myself, and I developed my own version of faith, which allowed me to have a boyfriend as long as I still pray 5 times a day. Balancing between the two extremes allowed me to continue for a while in relative peace. It was an unsteady truth, however, and would not last forever. Chapter 6. My own opinions. After living in India for 6 years, I had completed my bachelor's and master's degree in computer science. In search for a new adventure, I decided to pursue my second master's in Rome, Italy. This was not only a change in scenery, but also an important step toward independence. I was truly on my own for the very first time in my life. I was making my own decisions, choosing my own food, buying my own clothes, and even paying my own bills. Each new lesson, albeit late in life, taught me something new about myself. For the first time, I got to have my own opinions. I discovered wine, pizza, ice cream, coffee, joy and laughter. What I enjoyed the most of all was the freedom of living on my own. I also allowed myself a new freedom, a spiritual release. After years of struggling, I ended my religious practices and I felt at peace with my own decision. I was ready to explore other parts of life that I had been shut off from. I wanted love, So I fell for a charming British gentleman. He soon had to return to London, and on an impulse, I decided to follow him into London. I managed to earn a scholarship that would allow me to work in London for 6 months. Like many whirlwind romances, it did not last, neither did the scholarship. Discouraged and running out of options, I decided to visit my sister in the United States. Chapter 7. A new truth was beginning to emerge. I clearly remember my first week in America. I was standing in a cafe in the Upper West Side with my sister and her friends. While I was staying at New York's glorious skylines, one friend remarked that this was an area for rich people. I looked enviously at every runner who passed by in designer sweats and asked myself what difference there was between them and me. Would there be a day when I would join their ranks, living in upscale areas and working in one of those tall buildings? It sounded like an impossible dream. There I was in New York, back to square one. Jobless, homeless, hopeless, helpless. I felt entirely out of my element, and Queen was nothing like Rome or London. I began questioning my entire life and all of the decisions I had made up to that point. I was in emotional turmoil, and as a religious freak, I felt I had no place to refuge. It was then when I first visited a Zen temple. The idea of Buddhism as a religion was not attractive to me, but I found that sitting silent and idle went a long way to calm my spirit. I decided to take a 1-month residency at a Zen monastery in upstate New York. It was the beginning of new me, a new Mahdis. During that month, I learned how to love myself. It was truly transformative process. When I turned from the monastery, I packed all my flashy clothes and dresses and high heels into a box. I deleted all of the online dating apps from my phone. My head was clear. A new truth was beginning to emerge. I couldn't stop thinking about one of my old classmates from Rome. I reached out to her and we started a long-distance relationship. She came to visit me in New York and it was absolutely wonderful. I had fallen in love with woman. The reality of our circumstances eventually emerged. However, she could not move to New York and I could not move back to Rome. Her feelings for me eventually ran thin and the new Mahdis was alone. I was heartbroken. I thought that maybe I should try to be with a man again, but it felt unsatisfying and empty. I wasn't straight. I embraced the fact that I was a lesbian. With this act, it felt as though I had now landed the opposite side of everything I had been taught. I found my self-discovery to be empowering and I was more determined than ever to seek out my place in America. Chapter 8. The Fire of Determination. A friend of mine helped me get a job at a startup. I will never forget my first day at work. I was 27 and I had never really worked before. I didn't know what to do. I was raised with the mentality that girls' education wasn't important. And as strange as it sounds, I didn't even know how to use mine. I was unsure of myself and my skills, but I was determined that I wanted to be successful. With the fire of determination in my gut, my work ethic began to improve. I observed others working and learned to mirror them. Imitation success until it became my own. Along the way, I decided which path I wanted to take. I attended some meetups, learned some buzzwords, and took some courses. And eventually, I became a technical project manager. I felt as though I had at last arrived. 2 years later, I was working as a senior technical project manager in one of the tallest buildings in financial district area in New York. I was living in the Upper West Side neighborhood that I had envied 3 years before. While jogging, I would often reflect on my old life and marvel at how much had changed. One day I found myself back at the cafe where I had stood 4 years ago, dreaming of possibilities. The following year, I was introduced to neuro-linguistic programming and life coaching. I was drawn to it immediately. I started taking some courses, hired my own coach, and eventually started my own practice. Steve Jobs once said, "You cannot connect dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards." His words resonate with me. They have replaced the hurtful words of my childhood and lies that threatened to confine me. After a difficult and sometimes circuitous journey, I felt like I have finally arrived where I should be, but I'm not done traveling. Chapter 9: Becoming a Woman of Impact and More. I knew that New York would not be my final destination. Living in the same city as my parents and siblings, reuniting in some central location has been a dream of mine since I left Iran in 2006. Something told me that the next step in achieving this dream was to move to Los Angeles. In April 2019, I packed up my belongings and headed to the West Coast. In the remaining months of 2019 and year of 2020, I found so many great friends. I became board member of an Iranian LGBTQ nonprofit organization called Raha International, started Iranian LGBTQ women group, pursued my coaching profession and studied with multiple schools such as CTI, ICF, NLP, Positive Intelligence. I have come a long way and I intend to go much farther. Today I'm helping many people from all over the world find their true north. That is your internal compass, representing who you are at your deepest level. Maybe you're seeking freedom, belonging to have or find your true north spiritually. Or you're confused about your sexual identity. Or maybe like me, you're an immigrant struggling to fit into new culture. Or simply, maybe you have forgotten who you are and how to have self-love. I am here to help you. I'm here to hear your story. Please go to findyourtruenorth.mahdis.com and schedule your initial complimentary coaching session. I would love to be part of your journey. Thank you.